Podcast, your host, number one podcast coming to you live in America. And today we have a true expert, Mr. Andy Jacob. He is a key sales growth master strategist. Mr. Andy Jacob is the founder and CEO of Jacob Group, bringing more than 20 years of executive experience founding and leading startups in a high growth companies. Mr. Jacob is also a pioneer in the fields of consumer finance, online customer service acquisition, and consumer monetization, just to name a few. Mr. Jacob has traveled the world and given and shared his expertise and has been a guest speaker on CBS, ABC, NBC, Time Warner, and Bloomberg. Mr. Jacob's companies have also been covered by the Wall Street Journal. Mr. Jacob is changing the dynamic landscape of how businesses can get to a better place and a better level and 10x their business with his strategies leading the forefront and being at the absolute top of the industry. You won't want to miss these tips. So coming to the stage, let me welcome Mr. Andy Jacob coming to the stage. Welcome, sir. Yay!
Marcus, thank you so much for that amazing introduction. I think I'm going to have you follow me around the country and do all of my intros for me.
I would be honored. It is my absolute pleasure. Thank you for joining us on Gentleman Style Podcast Show, sir. Thank you for making time out of your busy schedule to be with us today. I appreciate it. Sir,
Marcus,
go ahead.
This is an amazing, amazing honor for me to be on the podcast for God, Family, Finance, and Self. In all candor, you and I have known each other now for a few months, and we're starting to build a wonderful relationship. I'm so excited to be on the Gentleman Style Podcast and add to your ever-growing list of people that are trying to make a difference in the world.
Absolutely. That's how we make the world a better place, is experts and knowledgeable experts like you leading the forefront. So I appreciate it. Thank you, sir. Mr. Andy, you are a multifaceted entrepreneur. What you could do anything you set your minds to. Why the focus on entrepreneurship and sales?
Well, Marcus, I love entrepreneurs. You know, when I started out, I went to college and I was going to be a health and physical education teacher. And I was going to be a coach, and I love coaching. I love teaching. And I did that for some time. I happened to have been one of the youngest coaches of high school varsity football and high school girls basketball many, many years ago, many more years ago than I want to describe and tell you about. But I'll tell you, Marcus, what I love is teaching, and what I love is helping. And you know, it brings me to something that I call the medicine cabinet principle. And this is something I've learned over the past 30 years of being in business. You know, Marcus, when I get a headache, I go to the medicine cabinet and I open up that medicine cabinet and I look for my aspirin. And the aspirin's not in the medicine cabinet. So I yell out to my wife, "Hey, honey, where's the aspirin?" And she says, "Honey, it's in the medicine cabinet." So I open up the cabinet a second time. And there's no aspirin. I say, "Honey, where's the aspirin? I have a splitting headache." And she says, "Oh, honey, it is in the medicine cabinet." So I open it up again, the third time, Marcus, and I still don't see the aspirin. So I say, "Honey, please, my headache is so bad. I can't find the aspirin. It's not in the medicine cabinet." She walks over to the bathroom. She opens up the medicine cabinet the fourth time, and right in the middle of the medicine cabinet is the aspirin. It was right in front of me the entire time, but I didn't see the aspirin. Why did that happen? It happens to all of us. And the reason why is because it was right in front of our face. It was right there in front of our face, but we didn't see it because it was so apparent in front of our face. Well, that's the same thing that happens in business quite often, is entrepreneurs are so close to their business, Marcus, that they don't get to see everything. There's things that are so apparent right there that if they just could see it, it could change the entire dynamic of their business. But they're so close to the business Marcus, that they don't see it. So what they need to do is bring out a consultant, bring out a mentor, bring out a third person to help them see the aspirin or the things that are very, very apparent to an outsider looking in that they can't possibly see because they're just too close to the matter.
That is major, Mr. Andy. And that's a nugget, y'all. That's a golden nugget. You can't get that or find that anywhere else. That is what you get with the Andy Jacobs Group and his leading team of expert sales professional. Mr. Andy, you have stories upon stories, and one of your most favorite noticeable one, and I want you to talk about today, is how did a man on a chairlift teach you everything you know? Can you speak to that?
Oh wow, well that's a good story. That's a great story. I see that you've looked at all my stories and you picked one of my favorite ones out. You know, listen, life is about the questions that you ask. In business, it's about the questions you ask to help you get to where you're going. You need to ask the right questions all the time. And that's the most important thing to grow as a human being and to grow your business. So many years ago, my wife and I were in Aspen, Colorado, and we were getting on a gondola ride. And we got on the gondola, and the gondola is a compartmentalized gondola that takes about a 15-minute ride up the slope, up the big mountain. And two people joined us. They didn't know each other. One of the people that joined us was a kind of messed up skier, bum kind of a guy. He had a big beard and he had ice all over his beard, and he, wasn't well put together, and he just didn't look like, he had any chance with the gal that came on right next to him, who was an amazingly beautiful woman, the second most beautiful woman on the gondola ride, behind my wife, of course. And they didn't know each other, Marcus. So we go start up the gondola ride, and I see this man who's not in the same league as this woman at all, it appears, start asking her some questions. And she doesn't want to have anything to do with this guy. She just wants to get up and go down the hill and have a great time on her own. But he's very persistent. And he keeps asking questions. What's your name? What do you do? What are you doing in Aspen, Colorado? What type of mountains do you like to ski? And she was very hesitant to answer these questions at the beginning. But as the 15-minute gondola ride continued, she started answering some of the questions. And they started having a conversation. And we get to the top of the 15-minute ride. The gondola opens up, and my wife and I step aside, and the two of them get out. And she says, "It was nice talking to you. I'm going to go now and go on my ski slope ride." And he said, "Oh, I have one final question for you. I see you're going on a Blue Diamond. I love intermediate slope rides. Do you mind if I take one ride down the slope with you? It would be a lot of fun." And she said, "Okay." So I said to my wife, that man was the greatest closer I had ever seen in my life, Marcus, because he asked all the questions. The woman had nothing, wanted nothing to do with him, but yet she was polite and started answering the questions. But the story gets better. The story gets better. 2 nights later, I took my wife to one of the very romantic restaurants in Aspen, Colorado. It's candlelit dinner. It's a beautiful atmosphere. And I look across the room and I see the disheveled ski bum, all shaved up, looking very nice. His hair was coiffed out. He had a beautiful jacket on, holding the hand across the table of the same girl, the same woman that he started talking and asking those questions to on the gondola ride. And I looked at my wife and I said, "This man is the greatest closer I've ever seen in my life, Marcus." And how did he do it? He did it by asking questions. He did it by being curious. And when you're curious and you ask questions, you get answers. And entrepreneurs oftentimes, Marcus, don't ask the right questions. A lot of times they don't even ask questions. They think they know it all. But I'll tell you, Marcus, they don't. I don't, you don't, nobody knows it all. That's the magic of life. That's the beautiful thing about life, is that it's an adventure. It's an experience. It's something that we can ask questions and learn about. So entrepreneurs listening to the show, ask a lot of questions. Ask your team questions. Ask your mentors questions. Ask your wife or your husband questions, your boyfriend, your girlfriend questions. How do you get better so that one thing happens? So that you provide a world-class service to your customers that they'll tell 10 people about and keep the ball rolling. And I think you know what I mean, Marcus, because you've done this in an amazing way at the Gentleman Style Podcast, and I love exactly what you're doing. You always ask the right questions to your customers, to your clients, to the people on the show. You ask the right questions off the show when you're prepping. This is all about what you're doing here, and you're a great example for the listeners and the viewers on the show.
Thank you so much, Mr. Andy, for that. What a great example, y'all. In that small scenario, in that small window of time, that gentleman was persistent. The ultimate sales tactician, brought to you by Andy Jacob and his team, the Andy Jacob Group. This is powerful. We got to go to a quick commercial break. We'll be right back, y'all. Don't go away. We'll see you guys soon. Good day, podcast listeners. This is your boy, Marcus Norman of Gentleman Style Podcast Show. I wanted to let you guys know that we will be rolling out a new feature and adding a join sponsor button next to the subscriber button here at the bottom of your screen. Once you click the button, it will display 3 membership levels. Gentleman Gentry, which is our entry level, Duke Duchess, which is our season level, and the Emperor and Empress, which is our most sophisticated level, which you will receive unique perks and benefits at each differing level and gain access to our community tab. We will also be sharing polls, upcoming events, and interviews, as well as receive feedback from our sponsors directly. Your support helps me find new and exciting guests to bring to the stage live. Well, in order to get the higher end speakers, it requires, well, some, you guessed it, money. So thank you for tuning in to my channel. And if becoming a sponsor sounds good to you, then select the join button below and choose your desired sponsor level. Let's continue to grow and serve the future of generations of men and women to come. Love you guys. Bye. Hey everybody, we are back to the Gentleman Style Podcast Show, and we have the incredible, amazing, super fragilistic expialidocious Mr. Andy Jacob leading the way and teaching the important sales cycles that small businesses don't do well. And so here he is coming to the stage. Mr. Andy, tell us, you already explained earlier that the biggest issue that most businesses struggle with is the sales cycle and entrepreneurships in starting their own business and growing. And you gave a great example of consistency and persistence in the pursuit of the ultimate goal, which is closing the deal. What is the most important department you would say, in your experience, a business needs? Is it a marketing and sales division? Is customer service more important, or human resources? Which is the most important in business?
That's a great question, Marcus, and very insightful, and thank you for that. Let's talk about a business, sort of what they're doing, where they need to go, and what's happening at the business. It all starts at the top. That's the most important thing. So, there's a rock and roll band, Marcus, called AC/DC. Now, I don't know, how many people have heard of AC/DC, but they're one of the biggest selling rock and roll bands of all time. They've sold over 150 million records or albums or CDs or streamers now, so they're big time. They're big. So many years ago, on their very first album, the very first song on that album, it's called "It's a Long Way to the Top, if you want to rock and roll. And the singer, Bon Scott, wrote that song because he knew how hard it was going to be to get to the top. It's the same thing with entrepreneurship. It's really hard to get to the top. It's very hard to be an entrepreneur, but you have to keep going and keep pushing and pushing through problems. And we all have problems, and we all have opportunities for improvement, and we all have pots in the road that we hit along the way as entrepreneurs. So let's talk about that just a little bit, because it's very, very important. It's a long way to the top if you want to rock and roll. And he talks about how hard it was or is going to be to become famous. The second song is called I Want to Be a Rock and Roll Singer. So this is a guy who knew what he wanted to do on the first two songs of the first album that they ever wrote 20 years ago. It's a long way to the top if you want to rock and roll. It's going to be really hard, but I want to be a rock and roll singer, and I know how hard it's going to be. So Marcus, what this means is that when we talk about entrepreneurship or businesses, the most important department really is the leader, the leadership. The leadership needs to lead. They need to understand that there's going to be some problems. There's going to be some potholes. There's going to be some challenges, but they need to work collaboratively together in an expert way by asking the right questions to their teammates and outside consultants and mentors to get to where they want to go. So the bottom line is that you know, as a business owner, it's going to be a long way to the top, but you know what you want to do. You want to be successful. You want to impact people. You want to have a powerful impact on the world that we live in. You want to make sure your employees have a great experience. And most importantly, and we can talk about this, Marcus, because I know you're an expert at this, you want to make sure that your customers and clients have a world-class experience so they come back time and time and time again.
That's so true. That's absolutely true. You all see the level of thing. He is 10xing businesses. And speaking about 10x, Mr. Andy, thank you for that. That's huge. Leadership, y'all, it starts at the top. And everything starts with leadership. That reminded me of John Maxwell, right? The laws of leadership. And so it starts at the top. Thank you for bringing that back into perspective. I completely forgot about that. My audience completely forgot about that. And that's huge. Mr. Andy, tell us, we have transitioned. COVID 2020 was a dumpster fire, right? We've had a tumultuous 2020. And so businesses have now making the transition from brick and mortar to virtual. And so what's the pivot? How is a business supposed to survive now that my company is now virtual? My team is working from home or even overseas. I may have a virtual staff. How can I continue to 10x my business and grow in a virtual market?
Marcus, that's a great question, and thank you for that. And that's why you've built the reputation as being a leader in your podcast, because you're able to break things down and ask questions in that type of a way. Let's talk about that a little bit, because this is very, very interesting. 2021 offers you an opportunity to do two things. You either get crushed or you can crush it. That's what happens in 2021. So when we're talking about this online opportunity, we want everybody to crush it. We don't want them to be crushed at all. You know, when I think about pivoting and think about being online, it makes me think of a very interesting story. You know, a number of months ago during the height of COVID, I was watching television and a commercial came on for this product called Daily Harvest. And I have nothing to do with Daily Harvest. I'm not sponsored by them. It's just a product that you make wonderful mixes and juices and you blend them up and you drink them, and it's really good and really healthy. And my wife, Kristen, and I really, really like it. We started ordering online, Marcus, and about 3 months later, I received an email. I received an email from the CEO that said, hey, we know that you're loving our product, but we might have a little problem. It's COVID, and we don't know if we can get dry ice anymore. So, in other words, it was packaged in dry ice. So they had a multi-million-dollar business that they thought was not going to have any problems. They never thought in a million years that the biggest problem they would have in their business was that the supply of dry ice evaporated. So they had a business, a multi-million-dollar business that maybe was going to go out of business because there was no dry ice left in America because it was all being used in the medical field. Well, thankfully, thank goodness, they were able to fix that, and they were able to get through that problem, and they figured out how to use less dry ice and use more insulation in the box that it came in to provide the continued service of the daily harvest box that my wife and I were enjoying, the little fruit drinks. The bottom line, Marcus, is that yes, everything is moving online. And at the same time, it's going to have the same types of problems for businesses that they have being offline. So what that means is that those CEOs and founders that are pivoting to move their business online, and there's a lot of them, there's two things that are going to happen. One, they're going to get crushed, or two, they're going to crush it. And I believe they're going to crush it if they ask the right questions. For example, why did I take it online? What does my customer need and want right now? Is there a difference between the customer's needs and wants by taking my business online versus having a brick and mortar store? How do I give them a smile online? Because when people walked into my store, I was able to be ingratiating, and I was able to smile at them, and I was able to pat them on the back and shake their hand, give them a warm hug if I knew them. But you can't really do that virtually. So you need to figure out how to do that in a virtual world, a virtual reality setting, so that you can provide that superior service that your customers both expect and deserve, got used to in the brick and mortar business, and now you've taken it online. So that's all about the pivot. That's a great question. And so many people are pivoting right now. It's really, really interesting. You know, Marcus, something happens online that's very interesting that I want you and your viewers to know that's very, very important. And you know, it goes like this. What your mom or dad taught you when you were 5 years old may be the most important thing that you've ever thought about in your business. And I'm going to tell you what that means. When you're 4 or 5 years old, you're taught, hopefully, God willing, to say thank you and please. Thank you and please. Or reverse it, you say please, then thank you. You're taught that as a young child. Now, Marcus, the interesting thing in today's world is that just by saying please and thank you, I know this is going to sound crazy, it makes you a superstar, because very few people still say please and thank you. So when you're online in your online business, talking about your question and answering your question, you also have to remember that you need to say please and thank you. Please, we want you to enjoy our product. Please, we want you to enjoy our service. We stand behind it. We have a value proposition that's incredible. We give a 100% guarantee on our product or service. It's very, very important to ask people to trust you, to trust the entrepreneur, to trust the service, to trust the product. And after they buy it, after they've trusted you to buy it, please find a way to say thank you, because that will separate you from the pack.
That's phenomenal, Mr. Andy, and that's what it is, right? That sounds familiar? That sounds familiar to the concept of, is that your what you teach on the law of small words and how it can improve your sales closing percentages? Is that the concept that we're getting at here?
100%. It's very interesting. And again, I know you have a lot of entrepreneurs watching the show, so I'm going to focus a little bit toward the entrepreneurs and the CEOs and the business owners, and then we'll talk about the sales cycle momentarily. But for those entrepreneurs that have their own business, and I'm seeing some of the messages come up on the screen. I know some of those people on that screen, and I love what they're doing as entrepreneurs. They're leading the way. They're lifting their head up above the crowd. They're looking both ways, and they're saying to themselves, you know what? I can do this. And I'm going to break down any wall. I'm going to break down any barrier that comes in my way. I'm going to come out the other side, and I'm going to be smelling like a bed of roses. So here's what I'm thinking right now. For entrepreneurs, when we talk about simplifying things, which goes back to your question, I always like to use what I call the back of a napkin test. When I talk to an entrepreneur, I want to see their entire business model on what I call the back of a napkin. If they can't encapsulize their entire business, everything on the back of a napkin, writing it out on the back of a napkin, then they probably have way too much clutter, way too much static in the vibration, way too many things going on that they can't focus on what they need to do. And this goes along with what I call the micro pitch. What that means is, entrepreneurs, you really need to be able to explain to me what your business is in less than 10 seconds. If you can't explain your business to me in 10 seconds, we need to work on that just a little bit. So it's called the micro pitch and the back of the napkin test. Now let's talk about the sales cycle a little bit. The sales cycle in today's world is way different than it was, Marcus, 30 years ago. 20, 30 years ago, we would read books on closing skills and, all these sort of fancy sort of psychological manipulations to get people to close the deal. And everybody was out doing their stories, and everybody was selling books and tapes and being on TV and doing lectures. And let's talk about selling and closing the deal. It's entirely different right now. Here's the deal, okay? The deal is that selling is a loving. That's what it's become. If you don't love your customer, if you don't love your product, if you don't love your service, then you have no shot in the world to make it. So when we talk about closing, when we talk about selling, and you talk about, using few words, those few words need to get across to the customer that you love them. And I'm serious about that. You need to love your customer. And I know people say that and it sounds sort of this esoteric, weird kind of a thing, but you really do. And what you need to love about them is the fact that they've given you an opportunity to provide something to them that's going to be good for them and their family. So that's the most important thing. So you need to love your customers in a way that when they go ahead and buy your product or service, that not only do they love it, but you love them for buying it. And you have to show it to them by saying please, saying thank you, sending them some follow-up communications, letting them know how important they are to you, because they are. Without them, your business doesn't exist. So they are the single most important thing in the entire world for you and your business.
Andy, that's phenomenal. You all are tuning in to the right station at the right time with the right man of the hour, Mr. Andy Jacob of Jacobs Groups. We got one more commercial break, y'all. Do not go away. You do not want to miss this for anything in the world. We'll be right back.
Are you a local business looking to offer your customers easy access to cash without having to travel miles? We're here to help. At Norman Legacy Investments, we provide free ATMs with free installation that provide a suitable investment for your business. Even better, we offer you some profit sharing and handle everything from start to finish. Just reach out to us today to schedule a free consultation.
back, y'all. This is Marcus Norman, the Gentleman Style Podcast. We have the incredible Mr. Andy Jacob of Jacobs Group teaching us, giving us a crash course. He just talked about the micro pitch, how a salesman, at the sales experience he learned from a chairlift on a ski trip with his family. And if you missed any of this, please go back and check this out. You don't want to miss it. Stay tuned. Stay with it. This is important information to take your business to the next level. He also discussed how to pivot in a virtual market and how to transition your business, which may be a brick and mortar business, to the next level and to a virtual platform so that we can make it, right? We are in a pandemic. Mr. Andy broke it down, and one of the most powerful things it reminded me of is I didn't love my customer and I didn't love sales when I first started because I didn't believe in the product. I didn't believe in what I was selling. I didn't believe in the mission statement of the company. And so naturally or unnaturally, I was terrible at sales. And so love your customer. But what I hear is do what you love, right? Find that niche, find your goal, and find the magic. And that's where the magic happens, right? That's where the power lies. Did I get that right? Did I miss anything in there?
Marcus, you've encapsulated it amazingly well. You know, I just have to thank you for what you're doing for all the entrepreneurs watching the show on the Gentleman Style Podcast. You've got an amazing group of people that love the show, that listen in. They're very engaged. It's very exciting to be on the show. And I think at this point in time, you know, we wanted to talk about, and we talked about this earlier prior to the show in our prep. I have a story of someone who I know who is a realtor. And this is a great story for your entrepreneurs about attitude. And I think it's really important to come across as we talk about loving your customers, as we talk about asking the right questions, as we talk about leadership starts at the top, as we talk about you have to be able to explain your business to me in 10 seconds or less, because that lets me know that you're really focused in on the good things that your business can do. So all these things come under the umbrella of having a great attitude as well. So here's the most important thing. When we think about attitude, I want to give you a story about this realtor who I know. When I would pick up the phone and talk to this realtor, I would always say to him, "How you doing?" And he would always say, "Hanging in there." Didn't really love that answer. I'd call him again. "Hey, how you doing? It's Jake. What's going on today? How are you?" "I'm hanging in there." And I finally, after a couple years of talking to him, finally said to him, "Listen, I have to give you a little advice. I'm not in love with you telling me that you're hanging in there. And the reason why is if you're saying to me every single time we talk that you're hanging in there, Marcus, I know you're telling everybody who calls you, who asks you how you're doing, that you're hanging in there. And let me tell you, hanging in there is not something anybody wants to hear from someone that's selling something to someone. Nobody wants to hang in there. Okay? So I said to him this, and this is kind of funny, but I think this is a great learning experience for the people watching and listening to the show. I said to him, when I ask you how you're doing, why don't you just say fantastic? And he said to me, "Well, I'm not always fantastic." I said, "Well, you know, you want to project a great image. Maybe if you start saying fantastic, you're going to feel fantastic." And I know on the Gentleman Style podcast, it's very important, you know, to talk about God, family, finance, and self. So I didn't want him to lie. If he wasn't feeling fantastic, you know, he said to me, "Why should I say fantastic?" And I said to him, "Listen, nobody will really know if you're doing fantastically great or fantastically bad. But I don't care. I want you to still say fantastic, because that's going to get your emotional state in the right mindset, in the right spiritual vibe to be able to do what you want to do, which is grow your business. Nobody wants to be around someone that's just hanging in there. So this talks about a little bit more about leadership from the top. You want to have that good attitude. You want to lead in a fantastic way. And I'm going to tell you, it's very contagious.
It is absolutely contagious, and it shifts. What you just described is the shift, right? But you're not just shifting the mindset of a customer or a potential customer, you're shifting your own, right? It starts in here, right? When Mr. Andy, and I think he did this subconsciously, but when he suggested start at the top, not just the top of the corporate structure, but top here, your mind. Change your mindset. People will be much better off if we just started and changed our mindset. So powerful, powerful words. Thank you for that, Mr. Andy. That's huge. Mr. Andy, we talked about this earlier, and I wanted to bring it back up because you actually concepted this. This is a part of your sales cycle. It's called the 10x paradigm. Can you explain to us what the 10x paradigm is in business, and how businesses and what you teach to in the Andy's group can catapult a business to the next level, please?
Well, thank you for that. That's a great question. Let's break it down simple, because that's what we do. It's about growth. Every company wants to grow. Every company needs to grow. So when I talk to companies, they say to me, hey, Andy, I want to double my business. I want to triple my business. I think that's great. And I'm delighted if they can double and triple it. But I tell them, we want to shoot for the moon. We want to grow 10 times. We want to start with the position that we want to 10x a business. Wherever they are, we want to 10x it. So that's what the 10x paradigm is all about. It's people start thinking about, well, maybe I can do 10% more this year. Maybe I can do 20% more this year. Maybe I can get my business up 40%. Boy, I'm going to be happy if I just stay where I'm at. Well, no, let's think about ways to increase your business 10 times. You know, it's very interesting, Marcus. Many years ago, if you keep on doing what you've always done, you're going to keep on getting what you've always got. Okay? That's about 20 years ago. That's sort of old time thinking. If you keep on doing what you've always done, you're going to keep on getting what you've always got. That's what they used to say in business. So in other words, well, you just keep your business where it's at. It's never going to go away. Nobody's going to take your market share. You're going to be on a nice ride and you don't have to worry about a thing. Well, that's not right. Because of the internet, because of the pivot that you mentioned of going online, as part of the 10x paradigm, there's a new saying now. If you keep on doing what you've always done, you're going to lose everything you have. So you have to think about that, because someone's going to come right up behind me and steal really what's yours, because you're not paying attention on 10x growth. Now let's talk about that just a little bit, Marcus, because this is really an important concept. At some point in time, somebody's in business, somebody's going to come along and put you out of business. However, that person that you want to put out of business, to put you out of business, that person who you want to put you out of business is you. Let me explain that. You have to keep growing. If you just have a business and you don't think of ways to continually improve your business and put the old model out of business, if you will, then you're not going to grow, and somebody else is going to figure out what you're doing and do a better mousetrap and build a better company and put you out of business. So you want to put yourself out of business by changing and improving what you're currently doing, so that the person that puts your old model out of business is really you in your new model. You follow what I'm saying? So you have to continue to improve. You have to continue. Someone just put on the screen, you need to compete with yourself and win. That's right. You want to compete with yourself to become better, because the old model, the model that you currently have, is going to change. And if you don't keep improving it, Someone's going to improve your model and put you out of business. So why don't you improve your model? You put your old model out of business and you become your new model. So that's what you need to think about with the 10X paradigm.
Mr. Andy, that is phenomenal. I want to take one question from the audience right here. So do you believe in slow growth in a business? You don't believe, based off of the 10X paradigm, you don't believe in a business should take its time and grow slowly? Because the statistics, right? It's numbers. You're a numbers guy. You and your team, you're numbers. So most businesses fail within the first 5 years. So isn't the slow path to growth better?
So this is a great question. And this is really comes to the heart of the matter. And again, remember we spoke about earlier in the show that it's about the questions you ask. So I would ask this question to that entrepreneur that's asking that question. I would say to them this question: can you grow faster? And if they say yes, then what I'm going to say to them is, let's go. Just because you've heard or read a book that says slow growth might be the best way to go, if you can grow faster, don't listen to the book. Let's grow faster. So I'm a big believer in massive action. I'm a big believer in massive growth. I'm a big believer in going for it in a big way. The truth of the matter is, and even though it goes against some conventional wisdom out there in many books that have been written, I don't believe in slow growth. I'm not a slow growth guy. I believe in shooting for the moon. And I'm going to tell you why. If you set your sight and your mind on slow growth, you will never exceed your slow growth mentality. You'll never be better than that slow growth, because you've already have it in your mind and your soul and your spirit that I'm just going to do a slow, steady pace. You know, it's the old story of the rabbit and the hare, and that story that we learned when we were a kid. Let me tell you, I'd rather be building my company fast and outlasting and outbuilding and staying around for a long time. If you can build your company fast and keep it around for a long time, that's a win-win situation. But let's go back just for a second. So when you have your mind in the position to think about slow growth, you're never, ever going to go faster than your slow growth. But if you think about 10X, you think about ways that you want to grow. You think about, I'm going to go all the way. I'm going to push this thing. I'm going to rock and roll with this thing. I'm going to figure out ways to really, really impact as many people as I can. I'm going to surround myself with great mentors to help teach me about what I need to do. I'm going to ask the right questions so I can figure out how to do rapid growth. And then I'm going to have a strategy so that when I have rapid growth, it's not all going to fall apart on me because I'm growing too fast. If you think in that way, what's the worst that happens? Well, maybe you don't go all the way, but you only hit 50% of the rapid growth. Maybe you don't go all the way, but you only hit 40% of what you're wanting to do. Maybe you only hit 30% or 20%. Maybe you only hit 10% of what you wanted to do with your rapid growth strategy. But I'll tell you, that 10% is much better than having the mentality of slow growth, because the slow growth will never match that 10%. So you set yourself high, set your sights high, and if you don't get to that super high level, it's much better than the slow growth.
Mr. Andy, that is phenomenal. That's absolutely incredible. Mr. Andy, how can people connect with you? How can they reach out to you and a business that's either thinking about starting up or struggling in this pandemic? How can they connect with you? How can we find you?
Marcus, obviously we have a website, andyjacob.com. I can be fine. Just Google my name. But listen, we love our customers. We want to practice what we preach. My text messaging program on my cell phone, it goes off all the time. I don't even mind giving out my mobile phone number to your listeners. They can text me. Please text me first, and then we'll get on the call and see if there's something we can do for you. It's 602-909-9890. I give my personal cell phone out because I want to lead. And people are saying to themselves, why is this guy giving out his personal cell phone? That's insane. I would never do that on a public forum. They're going to light up his phone and he's going to get phony phone calls and this and that. I don't care. Because this is about leading by example. This is about helping people. And you have to be ready when your customer is ready. And I see this so often that people that have websites or people that have businesses, they don't make themselves easily accessible. Well, how do you expect your customer to want to do business with you if you're not accessible? You need to be. So text me on my cell phone. I'll get back with you and we'll talk.
Mr. Andy, you are a brave man, first off, for publicly announcing your business cell phone. But you're right? How can I grow? How can I help? How can I serve? I learned this morning. Those who serve the most, those are the businesses that typically do well. So thank you for leading from the forefront and taking that step. And I hope anyone who watches this follows suit, because that's major and that's so true. Mr. Andy, thank you for your time, sir. Thank you for breaking out a smidgen of time in your busy schedule. This man has multiple companies that he's running, has a great team. I've been on his show, absolutely powerful. And sir, thank you for giving back in this way.
Marcus, it's been an absolute delight. I've been so much looking forward to coming on the Gentleman Style podcast. What you've been able to do with this podcast is truly remarkable. I've listened to some of the shows. You have some very engaging people. I'm humbled to be able to be counted with the group that you've been able to put on the show thus far. It's been remarkable. I know that your tagline is about God, family, finance, and self. Those are 4 very important things that everybody needs to think about, how they integrate into the life of an entrepreneur, into their life as a human being. And I just want to thank you for setting the precedent and being what I call a lamplighter, because, sometimes when we look at the world being a dark place, all it takes is a few lamplighters. All it takes is a few people to light a candle and then bring some light into the world. And then that candle lights the second candle. And then those 2 candles light 2 more. And then by the time you know it, the entire dark room is filled up with light. And we're able to get rid of the darkness in the world by people who are lamplighters that are leading the way, lighting each other's candles to make sure that we fill the world with exactly what your tagline is: God, family, finance, and self. And thank you so much for being an amazing host on your great show.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you for joining us today on the Gentleman Style Podcast show. I appreciate you, sir. Never give up. Never stop what you're doing. And thank you for that compliment. It touched me and moved me, and I won't give up either. Mr. Andy, sir, thank you again. And you, my audience, thank you all for tuning in and spending time with us here on the Gentleman Style Podcast show. I hope this message has served you. I hope Mr. Andy, I can get him back here in the near future. And we'll follow up with him and see if we can grow with him and take our business to the next level, because we're still in a pandemic and we still have businesses to run. So thank you all for tuning in. Like I always end every show, take care of your friends, take care of your families, and take care of business. This is Marcus Nolan, Gentleman Style Podcast, and Mr. Andy, signing off. Love you guys. Bye.